So we have come to the last session for the day, that is the panel discussion on biosimilars development. So the panelists for the session would be Dr. Maulik Doshi, Dr. Pawan Kumar Singh, Dr. Shubhadeep Singha, and Dr. Shrikant Kattu. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Shantanu Tripathi, who is the Director of Clinical Research at John C. Martin Center for Liver Research and Innovations at Kolkata. He was the Academic Dean, Professor and Head of Pharmacology at NS Medical College and Hospital at Patna. He was a visiting professor at Indira Gandhi Institute of Medical Sciences, Patna. He is also a principal investigator of COVAX Phase 2/3 clinical trial. He is a member of Standing National Committee on Medicines and West Bengal State Committee for AEFI Surveillance, Co-Training Panel under Pharmacovigilance Program of India. He also holds a position of Honorary Advisor to Government of West Bengal for COVID-19 vaccine and vaccination. He is an expert committee. He is part of an expert committee for clinical trial SAE and compensation assessment of Government of India. He is the chairperson of Clinical Research Ethics Committee of many hospitals and research institutes. He has received many prestigious awards, medals, and prizes in recognition of professional excellence. He has published around 200 research articles, reviews in national and international journals, and also published 10 books. He has acted as coordinator and investigator in Adverse Drug Reaction Monitoring Center under PDPI, Medical Device Monitoring Center under MVPI, and Vaccine Safety Monitoring Center at School of Tropical Medicine at Kolkata. He is currently member and expert committee for review of Schedule for amendment and framing of new drugs and clinical trial rules 2019 Government of India. And this session will also be moderated by Dr. Shoibal Mukherjee, who is a senior consultant in pharmaceutical medicine. He is a postgraduate in medicine and pharmacology. He has 30 years of experience in drug development and pharmaceutical medicine. He has headed medical and research department in Pfizer India, Ranbaxy Laboratories, GVK Biosciences, and Quantiles Asia. He is the founder and first president of Indian Society for Clinical Research. Currently, he is involved in assignments across the pharmaceutical research and medical startup domain as an independent consultant with assignments in pain, tropical disease, biologicals, vaccines, and phytopharmaceutical research. He has been guest faculty for training and doctoral program at leading medical institutions in India and is a member of research advisory board of various private and public sector organizations. And the session will also be moderated by our organizing secretary, Dr. Melvin Josh. Over to the panelists and the moderators.
Thank you, Dr. Indumati. So I now hand over the time to Dr. Shantanu sir and Dr. Shoibal. Are you there, Dr. Shoibal? Yeah, I can see Dr. Shantanu.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
I'm
Great. Hi,
Good
sir.
afternoon.
Hi. Good afternoon. So Dr. Maulik, Dr. Pawan, Dr. Shubhadeep Sinha, and Dr. Shrikant. I guess all of you are here. So. Yeah. I hand over the time to Dr. Shoibal, sir. Please, you can initiate the proceedings. So I request the delegates to please put up your questions in the chat box as we begin the session.
So hi, good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to be here moderating this panel discussion after a long day of very interesting sessions on biosimilars. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend all the sessions, but I'm sure they must have been extremely engaging, and we are looking forward to the discussion that will ensue now with the panelists, the very knowledgeable panelists that we have on this panel. So with biosimilars, we've come a long way. So from there are two perspectives here. I think one is that generic molecules, generic drugs have been there for a long time for small molecules, and over the years these have helped bring down the cost of therapy. And today, medicines are to a very large extent, particularly in the third world, in the developing world, available for reasonable prices, particularly, of course, in India, because we have a very enterprising private industry here that competes in a cutthroat manner with each other, and therefore the prices also are equally low. However, that was not true with biosimilars, with biologicals. So with biologicals, 20 or 30 years ago, we had, first of all, we did not have molecules which were biologicals and which were going off patent. So they were all patented molecules. They were all produced by a single innovator somewhere or the other. And therefore, the price was an international price. They were either not available at all in India, or they were available only at exorbitant prices, which, of course, even the most very wealthy of Indians were not able to afford. That situation started changing once the first biologicals went off patent. However, obviously, there was this tug of war between the innovative part of the industry and that part of the industry which works more in terms of getting molecules that have gone off patent, the generic industry. And that tug of war finally had to end in copy generic molecules being available. But the arguments that got thrown up, and some of them were very valid arguments, that the size of biologicals is so much bigger and they are so much more complex that any change in the manufacturing of a biological, no matter how you try to fashion it on the original manufacturer, even when the same manufacturer changes the manufacturing location, things might change, and you never know what will happen and what could ultimately be the effect of that. So now we've come a long way. We do have a lot of biosimilars beginning to come into the market. And as far as the Indian industry is concerned, I think we've come to close to the end of the road in small molecules. So the Indian industry has grown from what used to be a $2 or $3 billion market when I joined the industry 30 years, 40 years, 30, 35 years ago, to something like close to a $50 billion industry today, including both exports and the local sales. And so that huge jump from some 2 to 3 billion to coming to 50 billion is basically on the back of the generic small molecules being exported to the rest of the world, where 1 in 3 pills in the United States now comes from Indian manufacturers, and 1 of 4 in the UK comes from Indian manufacturers. Enormous jump. But to sustain this, as more and more of therapeutics becomes biologicals, we will have to gain the same stature and position as Indians and as Indian industry as we have in the small molecule generics area. So that is where the importance of the biologicals and the biosimilars is to us here in India. So I look forward with those starting comments to the discussion going forward. I will request Shantanu to say a few words, and then we can go on to the panelists.
Dr. Shantanu, you're in mute. Shantanu, sir, you're in mute. Sir, we can't hear you, sir. Shantanu, sir.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Now you're audible.
Just a second. Okay. There is some echo.
No, sir. Now we are not able to hear. No, sir. We are not able to hear now.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Okay.
Please go ahead, sir.
So I'm sorry for this glitches, and welcome everybody in this panel. And I think after Dr. Shaibal has had the introductory comments, we can now straightway go into the discussion part. Let me put it this way, that compared to the generic equivalents of the small molecule chemical drugs, how comfortable otherwise we are to for some, at least in so far as our experience with biosimilars, then we stand the last say 4 years, 5 years. Okay. In reference to our comfort using biologics, what are the feedback from the prescribers in reference to their ease of using and ease of prescribing biologics, how much trust they can have in their similars. Okay, if you can have some by different impact on this, very briefly.
Dr. Shantanu, sir, we are not able to hear you. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please go ahead, sir.
I was audible, and then I had put a question for the panelists, that what is the level of comfort on the part of the prescribers. Okay, when you compare between prescribing a generic versus prescribing the innovator brand, on the other hand, if you compare that prescribing a biosimilar, prescribing the originator biologic, so how do you say that we have the equal comfort zone in so far as the trust in its efficacy, safety, quality?
Yeah, I would ask Dr. Pavan or Dr. Maulik to start answering this first.
Thanks, sir, for asking this question. First, I want to wish Dr. Shoaibal and Dr. Shantanu a very good evening. Thank you, sir, for leading this session. Now, I will give some perspective from global, and I think then Maulik can add from what the Indian prescriber or KOL thinks of it. Now, in terms of the global perspective, only the FDA has a concept of interchangeability, where at the pharmacist level, it can be changed. And if the interchangeability is not proven, and currently there are very few drugs, only a couple which has got the interchangeability status, it is the prescribing doctor who has the right to either prescribe the biologics or the biosimilar. Now, the confidence is not only based on the similarity exercise what we do or the data we generate to get the approval. The confidence also came from what Dr. Amit Tang mentioned, that also the real world evidence, and also how you convince the KOL based on the different marketing or the medical affairs personnel that your biosimilar is in comparison with the originator. So this is not a very straightforward answer to this, but if you can prove interchangeability, then definitely at a regulatory level, you have the right that the drug can be switched between the innovator and the biosimilar. Otherwise, it's all depend on the KOL, and then you have to do the CME, you have to educate and present some real world evidence that actually your biosimilar is in line with the biologics, and ultimately it's the physician decision either to prescribe biologics or biosimilar. Now, having said that, in the terms of the evidence, scientific evidence, there is a large amount of say from the payers perspective in the global world. So because these are healthcare sectors who decide ultimately what is going to be prescribed, and then they can have a say that because of the cost constraint, the biosimilars has to be prescribed in certain pharmacies. So with this, I would like to pass on to Dr. Maulik to add on it.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Pawan. So, sir, for confidence, some things really matter. Is first thing is the reputation of the company whose biosimilar is in the market. So the prescriber might have used other biosimilar in the past, okay? And if the prescriber has found a good result with those biosimilars for different products, then for the new molecule, when it comes to biosimilar, they will definitely go with the history there because the confidence is good. So they would like to use that organization's product. Second thing is prescriber also like to see the data which are there in the public domain. So the publication they would refer the articles which we publish for our phase 3 program. They look at the data and they also try to see. Third thing is that the optionality, like because the innovator molecule is so much expensive, so the Indian prescribers are also waiting for some cheaper molecule. Okay, so if the cheaper molecule is available for the said indication, then they would definitely go with the biosimilar which is coming to the market. Now the fourth point is in the interchangeability. So the currently Indian regulation, there is no concept that you don't need to prove anything. So it basically go to the KOL that whether he would like to interchange that product or not.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So because
Srikanth, yeah, Srikanth, from the international perspective, do you think this is a difference as far as
So from
prescribers are concerned?
from prescribers' perspective, I think globally the onus is on data, right? So it's less of brand image, brand value at a global level, at least from my perspective. It is more of data, and then the trust in the regulators' decisions, the trust in these medical associations, professional organizations, their the treatment guidelines. So in regulated countries where the payers are not patients directly, so the payers are either the government agencies or the insurance companies, they ask for specific clinical data so that they get more confidence that yes, it is worth paying this much money for this biosimilar, and we can use this instead of a biologic. So the onus is really on the data at a global level.
So Srikanth, can I ask you, in the generic space, we've seen that when patents run out, there are lots of generic companies vying to come into the market, and there is a price tumble which goes down to about 75 to 80% reduction from the original prices. With biosimilars, what is the kind of price fall that we see? How many people are now, how many players come into the market immediately after the loss of patent, and what kind of then take up of biosimilars are we seeing with prescribers? Are a majority of them shifting to the biosimilar because it's less expensive, or is there a large percentage of people which are still holding out with the with prescribing the original brand and not really beginning to prescribe biosimilars quickly? What is the real scenario we see out there?
So a couple of things, Dr. Shoaib sir, here is that what happens in the small molecule generics, that once there is generics entry, and then the price competition, and then gradually the price tumbling down, that also happens in biosimilars. But the pace at which these prices go down is a bit gradual, because for small molecules, if there are like 20 companies competing, then the number of players in biosimilars are less because of the complex manufacturing processes and development processes. That is one part. And then the second part here is, at least when I talk about the regulated countries, right? So the markets are either tender oriented or insurance or payer oriented. So, here, the moment I can talk about some of the European countries where although I'm not directly involved in these discussions, but my colleagues, my team members are. So what I hear is, let's say there are, healthcare budgets at a country level or an insurance level. If you're talking about UK, then the NICE and all these things. So the moment the agencies are actually waiting for a generic or a biosimilar to come in. And we talked about the price difference is not really that high, maybe 30%, etc. But then if you look at these agencies, they have a defined budget, and then if they know that, okay, so for me, I can reduce my the spend on a particular originator biologic by 30%, which means I'm actually freeing up some money to give, bring in something else. I can probably procure some other drugs for my country, my patients. So, here in these countries, the management is really going by key account management, tender management, and these payers, getting payers hooked onto, as soon as the biosimilars are coming in. But at the global market, the trend that I observe is, the first biosimilar to hit the market has that, you get these tenders, you get these key accounts, and then once you get them, you retain the market for 6 months, 1 year, 1.5 years, depending on how the nature of the tender is. So that's the reason why the first biosimilar player to enter the market in the regulated markets has a really big win. And you can imagine the amount of market that one can capture if you are exclusive biosimilar, but alternative to originator biologic for 1 year, right? So that first 1 year plus or so is the biosimilar players come in, 1 or 2 will have advantage, and then gradually more biosimilars get approved, and then they come in, they use their commercial muscle. And then subsequent to that, so let's say 2 or 3 years later, the same thing will happen. As you have seen in small molecules, there will be too many players, there will be price reduction, and the biosimilar players are aware of this. That's the reason why the first to enter are the big ones to make it.
So, sir,
Okay.
I just want to add what Dr. Srikanth said with respect to Japan market, where I had some experience recently. So their regulation itself says that the first biosimilar to be enter can have the price, like if the originator is 100%, the first biosimilar can have price of 70-80% of that. The second to enter has to go to 50%, third to enter has to go to 30%. So that is as per the rule. So only the market share is more of the first couple of first, second enter. So the first is the winner. And if you're like fifth or sixth player, you really don't gain any market share. And as Dr. Srikanth said, it's the price lowers, but it's not as similar to the generic. And also the pace at which the price lowers is very slow compared to the generic.
So Pawan, the 6 months exclusivity that used to be there with small molecules is also there for biosimilars? The first biosimilar to come into the market?
No. Only in Japan it's there. They give some exclusivity, but for other markets it's not there. So the moment the loss of exclusivity is there, and if you have approval in place, you can go into the market.
Okay, but with no exclusivity, not even 6 months.
Dr. Shoaib, the exclusivity you are talking about is basically given at a country level, right? So that kind of exclusivity is kind of weaning off in most of the regulated markets, but the exclusivity is coming in through tenders, right? So if I win the tender, and then across the country there are 2 tenders or 3 tenders, I'm first to the market, and then I get the tender. The tender stays for 6 months, 1 year, I don't know, right? So it's an indirect exclusivity that the first player is getting in there, but not the FDA or EMA provided exclusivity. I think that part is weaning off gradually.
Okay. Okay.
And the whole reason they are saying
can-
that bringing biosimilar in the market, the reason is to lower the cost. And if you are giving that exclusivity, you are not helping the patients. So regulation wise, it's winning out, but as said, so tender, it's still the indirect way this exclusivity is still.
Dr. Sinha, your thoughts on this?
Okay, can I, is Dr. Sinha there?
Yeah, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Sinha is there.
Okay.
Yes.
Let us now come to another area, and that is, as we know that for biosimilar development compared to the biologicals, it is the analytical studies and then the PKPD equivalence. They are more important probably than actually phase 3 trial. And for the last, say, 4 or 5 years, we are also hearing there are some arguments in favor of redundancy of phase 3 trials, although as a regulatory requirement, phase 3 trials are to be done with biosimilars. But then what is your take on, and whether there is any kind of different paradigm is being thought or is being considered in the different by the different regulatory authorities regarding indispensability of phase 3 development for biosimilars, or we can think of relative redundancy and doing away with phase 3, provided of course we have otherwise done a good job at the analytical studies and the PKPD studies, etc. Dr. Sinha, what's your comment on this?
Thank you, sir. So my point of view is slightly different from what I think we are focusing a lot on the US and Europe and Japan market, but the large business is there on about 150 countries which are not US, not Europe, not Japan, not so those countries are where the there is so much difference between country to country that but all of them and or rather none of them exempt us from any of the phase 1 or phase 3 studies. The redundancy is still theoretical, and it's some drafts are there here and there, but I have presented it in about 16 countries, 16 MOHs, and everywhere they have first of all, the analytical similarity has to be very, very precise, and we have had rejection in 1 or 2 countries because of the analytical similarity rather than that of clinical issue. But then we came back with the analytical similarity, and then we got back the approval. So it's not, and secondly, to gain the confidence of the prescriber, unless we have clinical data enough, it may not be so easy to get the phase 3 trials or phase 1 trials to be out of the picture. What is getting more redundant is the preclinical studies. For example, India has for example, rodent and non-rodent, whereas some other European Union and some other Europe-like countries, they say that just one rodent species is enough. That is becoming more redundant because the relationship between the efficacy and safety of the biosimilar in the preclinical setting versus clinical, the relationship is so strong. So proof of the pudding lies in the clinical setting. And I was responding to the first question, what was there about the see what has happened in various countries. Is Indian generic manufacturers are present in a lot of these countries across the world, which is classified heterogeneously as rest of the world markets. These rest of the world markets, wherever Indian generic companies are, large generic companies are there, their biosimilar applications are given a lot of importance. There it does not matter if you are first or second or third. There it is more of the agency which is marketing your product. How strong are they? how well spread are they, how well connected with the regulators are they. And most of these countries have expert committees, just like Indian subject expert committees, with the majority of the KOLs in these SEC. For example, Mexico has a committee of about 30 plus SECs, and all of them are an expert committee for, and each therapeutic area has committee with so many heads of hospitals. So when they decide, yes, it is approvable, it easily it translates into prescription. So it's not the same story as it is much more predictable in the US, Europe, in Japan than these countries, and where the real war is at these the ROW markets than these, because here in US it is more of as much do you have the data or you do not have the data. If you have the data, enough data, the required data, you will get the entry maybe after a few years. Also, the period of entry in US is much longer. The period of entry in Europe is much longer compared to these countries, where the data requirements may not be as much, but the entry is more dependent on the local factors. Many countries have asked us to do even preclinical studies at their government approved institutions than because the rabbits or rats won't be different in Mexico or Argentina or Indonesia or Malaysia, but still we have to go ahead and do that. So there are many factors other than the standard data that we are talking about.
Okay. So the other question, when we talk about similarity, biosimilariity, given the fact that there is a lot of in the manufacturing and there is a huge variety of variability.
Shantanu's voice is not coming.
Dr. Shantanu, your voice is not heard.
Okay, in the meantime, if I can ask a question,
Yes,
while Shantanu gets his audio corrected. I wanted to ask the panelists from a development point of view. So if I was developing a biosimilar, we've heard that obviously, so this is two questions actually. The first is, when we look at all the biosimilars that have been approved worldwide so far, and when I say worldwide, in a number of countries, how many of them are have this interchangeability so that they can be interchangeably used with the originator? And what percentage are not interchangeable and yet they are in the market? That is one question that I'd like to ask. I don't have the data. And the second one is from a development point of view, then that assuming that many of them get into the market even without interchangeability, is it a good idea to aim for interchangeability, or maybe the cost savings and the faster that you can get into the market even without interchangeability is going to be an advantage, and getting into the market is more important than getting that interchangeability? And finally, the third question that I have is, what about bio-betters? We've heard a lot about these biologicals. You could come to a stage where you develop a biosimilar which is better than the original, and have any such molecules been approved anywhere worldwide? And if so, is it a good idea to try to aim for that or not? So these three questions, please.
Dr. Mukherjee, regarding your first two questions, let me also supplement with a question. Like, when you talk of similarity or interchangeability, as far as I know that interchangeability is a very rare commodity. Okay, but then when you compare with the originator biologic, it's the issue of biosimilarity or interchangeability. My concern is, in the same biosimilar, in batch-to-batch interchangeability or batch-to-batch similarity, what strategy or what mechanism is in place, particularly, say, for instance, in our country, in India, how to assure quality and similarity between two batches of the same product, okay, same company. So what are the takes by the different specialists, the panelists? Over.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, sir, I would like to answer first question about interchangeability and biosimilarity. So, regulatory-wise, these are totally two different terminology because the data required to get a biosimilar approval and the data required to get an interchangeable designation are quite different. Currently, till date, what I know, US FDA has only approved two molecules as interchangeable. One is insulin, which is of my company currently Biocon, and one is adalimumab from Boehringer, BI. Apart from that, no other biosimilar has got the interchangeable designation from the US FDA. So the basic difference between a biosimilar and interchangeable is that interchangeable can be given at the pharmacist level. You don't need a prescription of a prescribing physician or doctor. But for the prescription of biosimilar, it has to be prescribed by a KOL or the prescribing physician. So this is about interchangeable and biosimilar. Why it is very difficult to get an interchangeable designation is also that you need a separate study. FDA requires at least 3 switches. Like for example, you give a reference, then biosimilar, then again reference, then biosimilar, then again reference and biosimilar, and then compare the data and show that your immunogenicity is not increased while you are switching that. And that is the reason this study itself is more like a phase 3 studies and require a lot of effort and this. But now, as you said, most companies are coming with a strategy also in their first phase 3 itself to go with that interchangeability designation or try to get that interchangeability designation. But it's very difficult to achieve and get because you don't know how the molecule will behave in the terms of immunogenicity, both ADA and NAB. Second term about the biobetter.
No, one second, Pawan,
yes, sir.
Pawan, hold it. So, in this interchangeability thing, if I was to develop or you were to develop a new biosimilar, would you aim for interchangeability, or is it too difficult and too, that I might as well just get into the market without interchangeability and save some time, save some money, and be faster into the market? Which would be a better strategy?
So I would like to first secure the approval of biosimilar and then parallelly conduct a different study for interchangeability approval itself. And this interchangeability concept is only applicable for FDA. In EMA or Europe, there is no concept of interchangeability. Country-wise, these regulations differ. So they don't bother about interchangeability or anything. It's more about biosimilar is what.
Okay, thanks for that answer. Very, very interesting. The next part.
Yeah, biobetter, sir.
Dr. Sinha, please go ahead.
Yeah. So interchangeability, yes, it is a US definition. But so we as a company we do things parallelly because going into the India and ROW markets to register the products gives you confidence as well as confidence to the regulator when you go to apply to the US. That you have approval in say 28 countries or we have 30 countries. That is one. And secondly, US FDA approval, there are in biosimilar regulatory guidelines, there are US like countries and Europe like countries. For example, in Brazil, if you have a US approval, you don't have to do any local studies in Brazil. And if you have an interchangeability study done for the US, Brazil would be glad to give you approval, and Brazil is really a large country. Similar and US-like countries would be benefited. So it would be better to do a parallel exercise. In fact, yes, insulin is the only one, but there are companies, at least 5 companies I know of, who are doing interchangeability studies on their biosimilars, including our company, including Dr. Reddy's, including some other companies who are doing the interchangeability studies. It takes time and money, but it is worth the effort doing right from the beginning but it also boils down to the confidence of the R&D team and the manufacturing team, whether they have the confidence in terms of their comparability at the physicochemical level as well as at the biological characterization level. Because if there are differences there would be differences. It would reflect somehow into the clinical as well. So it all. To answer to that question, yes, we should do both parallelly. Launch some product, get some money, get some reputation, get some publications and use that for the US along with the interchangeability parallel. And that approval will help in some other countries. Mexico also gives a very high credence to the, and I had one, for example, in Nigerian FDA, they just first question they asked, is your product approved yet in US FDA? We said no. Then you will have to do a study in Nigeria. So that is yeah, it is, yes, it's a US FDA definition, but it should be done parallelly according to me.
Dr. Indumati, please mute your audio, Dr. Indumati.
Okay, so can we talk about biobetters now? Pawan, you were going to answer.
Dr. Pawan, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. So, sir, I work totally under the gambit of regulatory definition, and the company's strategy are different for my company compared to what Dr. Sinha is saying. Our focus is totally on the regulated US and Europe market. Okay.
Can I put it this way? Biobetter is not really a goal-oriented development trajectory. When you find that because all the biologics, including biosimilars, should be considered otherwise as unique, different products. So it is possible that some product they ultimately found to be, instead of equivalent, similar, they become superior than the reference product. Then you call it biobetter. But I think that whether from regulatory parlance, biobetter has any kind of recognition, or whether the regulators actually encourage people to go for biobetter. If you can comment on these.
Sure, sir. So I am totally in agreement what you said, sir, that there is no regulatory terminology called biobetter. It's only what you can prove through your similarity exercise is that you are biosimilar. Now, if you want to claim a biobetter, then you cannot go through a biosimilar, that is 351K route of application. You have to go through 351A route of application. Yeah. Then it requires much more data package. And even, for example, in your statistical analysis, if you are finding that you are crossing that limit of the margin which you have selected to prove your equivalence, similarity, you cannot claim, because you have to prove through sensitivity that neither you are inferior nor you are superior. If either you are not meeting, you cannot be given designation of biosimilar. Biobetter is more of a clinical terminology where you have observed some data where your product is shown to have some more efficacy in the absolute term, not in the terms of your equivalence margin limit. Then it's more of a marketing or the medical affairs game to show that your product has behaved better. But statistically or in the regulatory sense, there is nothing called biobetter.
Can I put it? It will be a different biologic rather.
No, sir. I have one.
Maulik, please.
Yeah. So, sir, what happens that when we say biobetter, so in other words, what we are saying that equivalence margin, upper bound of equivalence margin is crossing the limit. Okay. So that means that product is showing a better on some part of the efficacy. But if nobody is claiming that my product is better than my product, okay, whenever the dossier is submitted to the regulatory agency, what regulatory agency is interested that whether this is a biosimilar or not. So they are not looking at only the phase 3 data. So I second that your earlier point on the earlier part of Kenga program, that to get an approval for biosimilar, the more emphasis on the quality, function, and PK data. Okay, if in this domain the product is showing similarity, then doing a phase 3 program, and in a phase 3 program, if we find any kind of surprises like biobetter or any other issue, still there will be a totality of evidence approach, and regulator will see all the data, and then based on that, a collective decision, the approval will be given. And
so does that mean that there is going to be a possibility of a drug being possibly biobetter having a delayed entry in the market?
Yes.
Having a delayed entry in the market?
So I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why there can be a bio-better. Now what happens that when you say bio-better, what we are saying that upper boundary is crossing the limit of the criteria. Like suppose I have limit of 80 to 125. So now in US and Europe, there is a two approach. One is risk difference approach and risk ratio approach. Okay, like the US follows a risk ratio approach. So you have a ratio, it should be within limit of 80 to 125. And then in Europe, there is a risk difference approach. So your margin should be within plus or minus 15. Okay. Now, when you are submitting your equivalence margin, you have to justify that my margin is based on this assumption. Now, let's come to what are those assumptions. So, those assumptions are those meta-analysis study in which you are comparing your product with against then placebo, and you are showing the true effect of product. Now, but so that is a challenge with biosimilar study that you cannot get the exact study based on which you can do meta-analysis and you can come to your margin and then come to your sample size. So that's a challenge with biosimilar product. So now since your margin is not a perfect because you can't do because you don't have data. So there are high chances that your margin is not correct. So it is possible that it may cross the upper boundary, but still there is no issue. The product can get approval based on the total data.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay, and you won't be able to claim it though.
Sir, nobody can claim biobetter because your program was not for biobetter; it was for biosimilar. Like in your quality, you never mention it's biobetter. You always say it is highly similar. It is highly similar. Then in PK also you are saying it is within 20 to 125. When you do PD, you also say it's biosimilar. Now when you are doing phase 3, now in phase 3 we all know so many surprises can come because the disease which are going to study it is very heterogeneous, right? And because of heterogeneous disease, there can be confounding factor which can have some surprising results. So you cannot claim biobetter. It is only a biosimilar.
Any examples of anyone's which
So
consistently shown a better result on one parameter?
Ontruzant is a product trastuzumab. Okay, when it was studied, it could not the upper bound. It could not meet the equivalence criteria. Okay, still that product was given approval.
Okay, and this was on what parameter was it?
Efficacy, ORR.
Okay. Great, very interesting, very interesting. Thanks for all those comments.
So I have
the other part of the question about the other part of the question was batch similarity of the same product.
So sir, there is no regular
same product.
Shantanu, you have to say that again.
No, sir is asking about the batch to batch variability.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sir, are you trying to ask? Is there any regulatory requirement to submit batch to batch data?
Decide whether there are regulatory monitoring regarding batch to batch similarity of the same product.
Is there regulatory monitoring of batch to batch variability of the same product? That's what sir is asking.
No. There is no regulatory. In India, there is no regulatory.
So even otherwise also there is no regulatory requirement if your manufacturing process is same. But in case you are changing your manufacturing process for upstream or making it more efficient, then again you have to show that the new batch which is released is within that limit with the original batch for which you have got the approval. But if your manufacturing process and everything remains same, there is no need of the data to compare different batches.
Okay.
But don't you have to submit at least 3 batches, the samples from 3 batches?
Yeah, that is the initial part, sir. We are talking about after approval. If
3 batch stability,
in the market.
Stability data we have to submit.
Okay. In the interest of time, I would request each of the panelists to give their closing comments, after which Dr. Shantanu and Shoibal can also give their closing comments. We'll start with Dr. Sinha first.
Just I want to respond to biobetters. I think biobetter is, as I said, not regulatory definition, but biobetter is definitely on the rise. It is a different product by itself. For example, there is one product called Gazyva of rituximab biobetter, which has a better ADCC and a slight modification in the structure. The structure has changed. There is also in the due course in next few decades, maybe there will be many more biobetters that will come in with the current biosimilar biological entity improved in terms of structure or their activity, leading to a better activity, better potency, lesser safety issues. They will become a biobetter of the innovator. So generally, so biobetter and biosimilar totally are two different concepts by itself. Biobetter will gain regulatory definition very soon once more products like Gazyva comes in the market. There are also biologic conjugates like trastuzumab emtansine, which is not a biobetter, but definitely an improved product on trastuzumab for resistant trastuzumab resistant products, the disease cancers. Emtansine works, trastuzumab emtansine works better than that of trastuzumab. So there will be in a few years there will be a clear-cut holistic definition of a biobetter, and there is a movement on that. There are many companies who are developing biobetters on their existing molecules.
Yeah.
And do they have to submit the whole package or whole data
Yes.
package?
Whole data package. Whole data package. That is what Gazyva is doing right now. They're actually doing the entire end-to-end package for their product. It is
Okay.
Thanks for that. Very interesting.
So your closing comments on the current landscape of biosimilars development. I would like each of the panelists to respond to this. What are your thoughts on how it has been evolving? Any closing remarks?
Whom should start first?
Dr. Maulik, you can start.
Okay, fine. What I have see that in biosimilar domain, there is an unanimous consensus that quality, functional, PK and PD are absolutely required for biosimilarity. Phase 3 program, it doesn't add any value if your product is passing quality, functional, PK and PD. So now phase 3 program can be minimized or it can be totally waived off, because Indian guidelines says you can waive off phase 3 program. Recently, 3 or 4 months back, UK also published their guideline. In there, they have mentioned that you can waive off for phase 3 program in UK also with some condition. USA, I attended 2 workshops in USA, so they have not said that yeah, you can waive off phase 3 program like India and UK, but they are saying okay, you should do PD pharmacodynamic study and you show absolute similarity, then there can be thinking of this phase 3 program. Secondly, there are 2 approaches. One is the totality of evidence approach, but nowadays I see publication on second approach, that is confirmation of sufficient likeliness approach, where the focus is mainly on the quality and PK. So I see in the future regulatory be more flexible in data, and they might see more focus on quality, function and PK and not on the phase 3 program.
Thank you, Maulik. Dr. Sinha?
Yeah, so when we started our journey in the industry in 2000, much later than when Shoibal sir did, but then from then on we have seen a tremendous change in the so everything has changed with the regulations. When the regulations started coming in, the patent started getting waived off, the biosimilars started getting developed. Today, probably 900 biosimilars are in development and worldwide. And yes, India is quite behind, but India is doing its bit. All the top manufacturing companies in the top 20 are developing biosimilars and or are getting into biosimilars. So biosimilars have changed the treatment paradigm. For example, in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, once upon a time the And I said that's the most classic example when just plain CHOP chemotherapy could only have a survival of a 50 to 60%, has gone to 96% to 100% in many cases with the addition of rituximab. So treatment guidelines are also adopting the biosimilars, biological entities, and also biosimilars. So when that is happening, biosimilar development is required, because these are long duration treatments. Therefore, the requirement for a cost effective version, and again, rituximab is a classic example of how cost has reduced. Today, rituximab is treated like water. At a few thousand rupees, you can get rituximab vials. So, and this will be the story with all other biosimilars as more and more manufacturers come in, and I see a much more emphasis into biosimilars. The other thing is that it's not just Europe, US, and Japan, not just the ICH countries which have biosimilar guidelines. Almost all, at least 40 countries around the world have their own biosimilar guidelines. When they are getting developed, they have much larger populations, much larger business. Therefore, more companies would definitely come in to develop biosimilar.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Dr. Pawan?
Thank you.
Thanks to all the panelist member and the chairperson. So I would just like to add that the whole concept of biosimilar is to make the access to a medicine which many patients cannot afford, who really need it. So even the regulatory, the science group, and all the payers group, patient group are working towards making the development of biosimilar less cost effective, more cost effective, so that more subjects can have the access. On a lighter note, as Maulik said, that phase 3 trial may be redundant. That may be good for the patients, because we can have a biosimilar sooner in the market and at a less price. But that will lead to redundancy of my job. So I hope it should not happen till my career. I should keep on doing it. With this redundancy in phase 3, I think the role of real-world evidence which needs to be generated to give the confidence to the prescriber is now really going to increase. So we should focus more on real-world evidence and pharmacovigilance and post-marketing activity if this phase 3 data is going to be redundant. So that is what I can foresee that is the near future which will be coming. And as Dr. Sinha said, that let's focus on the majority of world. I don't call it as ROW, but MOW. Majority of the world population also, not on only ICH countries. And let's make biosimilar accessible to the needy. The only problem area which I still see is that ICH came in 96, but still there is no communication. It's still communication gap between US and EU itself. Japan is a different universe. If US and EU are different world in terms of regulation in the biosimilar, and it's very difficult to harmonize our clinical development program to satisfy the need of all these agencies. So in near future also, I would like to see that this regulatory bodies harmonize among themselves, so that the data generation should not be duplicated or required, and ultimately it leads to the biosimilar to reach to the subjects in a more timely manner. And with this, I would like to thank you, Dr. Melvin, and all the panelists and chairperson again for giving me opportunity to share my thought in this forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pawan. So I would like the moderators, Dr. Shantanu sir and Dr. Sharbal, to give their closing thoughts.
Yeah, wonderful discussion, and a lot of very pertinent issues have been touched upon. And as a concluding comments, I would echo what Dr. Pawan has said. I would rather say whether or not the emphasis on these three, notwithstanding whether it stays, whether it goes, importance of real-world evidence is to be emphasized. Okay, and we need to keep on generating data on safety, effectiveness with the biosimilars. And in fact, those evidence should also be, in my opinion, also be part of the requirements. I think the time will come when the regulators will also ask for the post-marketing on effectiveness and safety of biosimilars. uh, because of the very fact that every biosimilar, even with the different batches, there is a possibility of variability. And it is only through this post-marketing surveillance data that we can ensure its effectiveness and the safety to uh, to continue to the desired level to remain in the market. With this, I thank all the panelists, very erudite panelists, and my co-chair, co-moderator, and Dr. Melvin for having this wonderful program. Thank you very much. Over.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Shoibal, sir.
Yeah, so what I'd like to say is that, we've had biologicals for many, many years. If you go back to insulin, it's almost coming to 100 years now. But biosimilars is something really new, and new in the sense that while we've been talking about biosimilars theoretically for quite some time, at least 2 or 3 decades now, but their real impact in the market is what we are beginning to see only now in the last decade or so. And I see that changing a lot of things, including changing pharmacology as such. So if we are saying now that, not as if that, small molecules will disappear, small molecules will remain with us, and the small molecule pharmacology will still continue to be a guiding light. But if, let's say, in the near future, 20, 30 years from now, we have as many biosimilars in the market and as much therapeutics based on biologicals as there is on small molecules, then there is a change in the face of clinical pharmacology, because we are beginning to say that the clinical trials don't matter that much. We are also saying that even the animal studies don't matter that much because the compare what happens in animals is not necessarily what happens in humans in the first place. So we are going back to the molecule itself and its quality. These are things that as pharmacologists we did not really pay that much attention to in the past. But now in future generation of pharmacologists will have to pay much more attention to the structure of molecules, how they change. Little bit of change in those molecules makes a lot of difference. How the immunology of those molecules works, and whether what changes and epitopes and things like that. So I am seeing in this biosimilars advent a change in pharmacology coming about. And my message to the youngsters who are listening to all of this is pay much, much more attention to biosimilars and how they are developed, what their pharmacology is all about, and how large molecule pharmacology differs from small molecule pharmacology. And that would stand you in good stead, I think. We oldies will never be able to catch up, but you guys should be able to do it. So yeah, read about them, study them, and take every opportunity to get experience with biosimilars. So with that, thanks a lot to the organizers, to Melvin, to Shantanu, to all the panelists out there. It's been wonderful talking to you all.
Yeah,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shoibal. Thank you, Dr. Shantanu. And I really wish to thank all the panelists and moderators for this session. Dr. Maulik, Dr. Pavan, Dr. Shubdeep, Dr. Srikanth, and Dr. Shoibal and Dr. Shantanu. You really made this a fascinating round of discussion. There's a lot of requests for putting this recording of this video to be shared so that they could again sit and listen and understand these thoughts better. So, and even for this rest of the sessions also, we would like to thank all the speakers, all the chairpersons for being part of this national workshop on biosimilars development. As Dr. Shoibal had said, I think this is not some area that we could just ignore. In the days ahead, we are going to see the increasing importance of biosimilars, and probably it could even fundamentally change the way we look at pharmacology as a subject. So on that note, I would like to thank all the delegates for being part of this workshop all these few hours. And we will share the e-certificate in a couple of days.